Good evening. History has a wicked sense of humor, and right now it's delivering one of the most complete role reversals we've ever witnessed. We keep hearing that America and China are sliding into a new Cold War. In Washington, the default script is clear: the United States will once again be the open, adaptable, innovative leader of the free world, while China plays the rigid, ideological, authoritarian power doomed to collapse under its own contradictions, just like the Soviet Union. But pause for a moment. What if the roles have completely flipped? What if China is now behaving like 1950s America, pragmatic, focused on trade, infrastructure, and building partnerships without ideological baggage? And what if the United States is starting to look eerily like the late-stage Soviet Union, rigid, ideologically obsessed, militarily overextended, and trapped in domestic gridlock that prevents any real course correction? This is the central argument I make in my book. Has China won? And it's a reality that should keep every serious American strategist awake at night. During the original Cold War, America was the flexible power. We adapted quickly. After the disaster in Vietnam, we cut losses and pulled out. We built the global multilateral system, the IMF, World Bank, United Nations, and invited the world to join. We prioritized domestic strength and economic vitality. The Soviet Union, by contrast, was doctrinaire. It clung to a failing ideology, poured treasure into hopeless military adventures like Afghanistan, and neglected its own people's needs to prop up an empire it could no longer sustain. Today, if you examine Beijing and Washington side by side, the inversion is striking. China has essentially stolen America's winning playbook from the mid-20th century. And America, painful as it is to admit, has adopted many of the losing habits that brought down the Soviets. Let me break this reversal down across three critical dimensions: ideology and strategy, military and economic priorities, and global diplomacy. Start with the mind, the strategy that wins or loses great power competitions. The architect of America's Cold War victory was George Kennan. In his famous long telegram and Mr. X article, he outlined containment, but he stressed something vital that Washington seems to have forgotten: for the United States to prevail, it had to maintain its own spiritual and institutional vitality. It had to prove it could solve its internal problems better than the alternative system. Above all, Kennan warned against becoming rigid or mirroring the enemy's flaws. Cold War America stayed pragmatic. We allied with whoever advanced our interests: democracies, dictatorships, monarchies, even opening to communist China in 1972 to balance Moscow. Results mattered more than ideological purity. Now look at today's Washington. It has locked itself into a simplistic democracy versus autocracy framework. It sounds morally clear, but in practice it's a geopolitical straitjacket. It divides the world into friends and foes based on governance style, making it impossible to engage pragmatically with most countries. Fully 88% of the global population lives outside the West. Many of those nations, authoritarian, hybrid, or simply developing, don't pass Washington's ideological tests. So we freeze them out, limiting our own options. China, meanwhile, has become the master pragmatist. Despite the communist in its name, the CCP isn't trying to export revolution like the Soviets did in Angola, Nicaragua, or Vietnam. Beijing doesn't waste resources sponsoring global ideology. Chinese leaders don't travel to Africa, Latin America, or Southeast Asia with lectures on human rights or governance models. They arrive with engineers, financing proposals, and contracts. Their question is simple: what do you need built? What can we buy? What can we sell? This is precisely how America won influence in the 1950s and 1960s, opening markets, providing capital, focusing on mutual economic gain. Today, China defends globalization and open trade, while the United States erects tariff walls, withdraws from agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and increasingly turns protectionist. The nation that invented the post-war trading system has become one of its biggest skeptics. The communist state has become its most vocal champion. Why this shift? Because American domestic politics has become paralyzed, much like late Soviet politics. Strategists in Washington know prolonged trade wars hurt American consumers and workers. They know tariffs act as taxes on their own people. They know abandoning TPP handed Asia's economic architecture to China on a platter. But political polarization makes reversal impossible. No leader can admit error or compromise without being destroyed at home. The system is locked by vested interests and partisan fury. China, by contrast, pivots ruthlessly when needed. Deng Xiaoping's famous line, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice," captured this mindset. When pure communism failed economically, he scrapped collectives and open markets. When pollution threatened stability, Beijing aggressively shifted to lead in renewables and green tech. Adapt, correct, move forward, no sacred cows. First reversal: the communist power is now the flexible pragmatist. The democracy has become rigid and ideological. Second dimension: resources, guns versus butter. The Soviet Union collapsed in large part because it bankrupted itself militarily. With a far smaller economy, it tried to match US spending dollar for dollar. It prioritized tanks over tractors, missiles over consumer goods. The disastrous decade-long war in Afghanistan drained blood and treasure while delivering nothing. Today, which power fits that profile? The United States has spent roughly $8 trillion on post-9/11 wars in the Middle East. According to reliable estimates like Brown University's Costs of War project, trillions poured into conflicts that produced chaos in Iraq, failure in Afghanistan, and eroded global credibility, While America fought endless desert wars, China invested at home. It built the world's largest high-speed rail network over 40,000 kilometers. It constructed modern airports, deep water ports, nationwide 5G. Fly from outdated JFK to Beijing's gleaming Daxing and you feel like you're traveling from the developing world to the developed. This mirrors the old Cold War contrast. Soviet citizens in bread lines while the state built submarines. But reversed. American infrastructure crumbles, potholed roads, aging bridges, underinvested schools, yet defense spending tops $800 billion annually, more than the next 10 nations combined. We're modernizing a nuclear arsenal of thousands of warheads at costs exceeding $1 trillion over decades. China maintains a minimal credible deterrent, around 300 warheads, because its strategists understand that's enough for security. The savings go into AI, quantum computing, education, advanced manufacturing. China is playing Eisenhower-era America rational defense, massive domestic investment, as the true foundation of power. The US is playing Brezhnev-era Soviet Union, obsessed with raw military metrics while the economic base erodes. Second reversal, one side pours capital into legacy weapons and endless conflicts. The other builds the future. Third dimension, the world, allies and influence. Cold War America mastered coalition building. We created NATO, the Marshall Plan, the Peace Corps. We welcomed global talent and students. We were the attractor, the shining city on the hill. The Soviets invaded Hungary and Czechoslovakia, bullied smaller states, isolated themselves through aggression. Today the dynamic has flipped. America increasingly weaponizes its unique financial tools, the dollar's reserve status, SWIFT access, through unilateral sanctions on Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and others. It threatens secondary sanctions against allies who trade with disfavored nations. We withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, a multilateral agreement endorsed by the UN Security Council and our European partners, acting unilaterally against their pleas. This breeds resentment. Nations aren't turning to alternatives because they love China's system. They're seeking options because they're tired of Washington's pressure tactics. China fills her vacuum through Belt and Road, offering infrastructure financing without political conditions or lectures. Western critics call it debt trap diplomacy. Many recipient leaders call it the only serious development partner available. China has become the second largest contributor to UN peacekeeping and a defender of multilateral institutions, while America has withdrawn from WHO, UNESCO, Paris Accords, and trade frameworks under various administrations. To much of the global South Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, America increasingly appears erratic, unilateral, and self-interested. China appears predictable, generous, and focused on win-win. Third reversal, America disrupts the order it built. China stabilizes and integrates. This picture is stark, but it's not irreversible. America retains enormous advantages no rival can match: the world's top universities, unmatched culture of innovation, and ability to attract talent from 7 billion people worldwide. China's more closed, ethnocentric system limits it to 4 billion. In the long run, openness wins, but only if we use it. America must stop mimicking the declining Soviet playbook, rigid ideology, overextension, domestic paralysis, and rediscover its own winning formula: pragmatism, domestic renewal, leading by example rather than lecture, investing in the future rather than legacy conflicts. The 21st century will be decided by economic competition and technological leadership, not military conquest. If America keeps pouring treasure into aircraft carriers while its infrastructure decays, keeps dividing the world into ideological camps while China connects it economically, keeps sanctioning partners while China builds their roads, it will lose. Not because China is invincible, but because America will have forgotten the very strengths that made it great. The playbook that won the last Cold War is written in American ink. It's sitting on the shelf. Washington just needs to pick it up and start reading again. If this flipped your perspective on the US-China rivalry, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep this conversation going. The future increasingly appears erratic, unilateral, and self-interested. China appears predictable, generous, and focused on win-win. Third reversal, America disrupts the order it built. China stabilizes and integrates. This picture is stark, but it's not irreversible. America retains enormous advantages no rival can match: the world's top universities, unmatched culture of innovation, and ability to attract talent from 7 billion people worldwide. China's more closed, ethnocentric system limits it to 4 billion. In the long run, openness wins, but only if we use it. America must stop mimicking the declining Soviet playbook, rigid ideology, overextension, domestic paralysis, and rediscover its own winning formula: pragmatism, domestic renewal, leading by example rather than lecture, investing in the future rather than legacy conflicts. The 21st century will be decided by economic competition and technological leadership, not military conquest. If America keeps pouring treasure into aircraft carriers while its infrastructure decays, keeps dividing the world into ideological camps while China connects it economically, keeps sanctioning partners while China builds their roads, it will lose. Not because China is invincible, but because America will have forgotten the very strengths that made it great. The playbook that won the last Cold War is written in American ink. It's sitting on the shelf. Washington just needs to pick it up and start reading again. If this flipped your perspective on the US-China rivalry, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep this conversation going. The future isn't written yet,